The personal views and opinions of any guest on this program are not that of Perfect Trust Productions, LLC. For this episode, we are heading off to the eastern part of Virginia, where there is plenty of land and water, where the history goes back before our country became one, to where the foundation of what would be the United States would actually begin. We are going somewhere that is not only a popular tourist attraction, but is also the place to go on school field trips if you're a student in the school system here in Virginia. A place where I haven't been since I was 9 years old. Jamestown, Virginia. The voyage to the New World. Storms, illness, and despair. All for a promise of a better life. Or were these all omens of things to come for the colonists? The very location that would be called the birthplace of the country would also lay claim to a troubled past. The first English-speaking settlement in America was established here in 1607. This would prove to be harsh times. Living conditions were terrible. The land was difficult to plant, and there was a long drought. By 1610, only 3 years later, 60 out of approximately 490 original settlers survived. This will be known as the Starving Time in Jamestown. This photo from 1901 shows the ruins from the bell tower. Throughout the area, you will find photos such as this from Jamestown Rediscovery and Preservation, Virginia. I took photos of them and edited them for the episode so you could see them more clearly. Here, a 1901 photo of the church excavations and cemetery before restoration. Standing outside this historical location was already overwhelming, which made me more anxious as to what was waiting inside. I wasn't prepared for the energy that I was about to feel, standing inside the remnants of the original bell tower, placing my hand upon some of the original bricks, the same bricks that predated our country. I wondered what secrets they held. Stepping through the threshold, peering up, seeing sky, where the tower and the church once joined all those years ago. Inside, we saw an interpretation of the 1617 to 1618 timber frame church. It was here the General Assembly, who were the first representative body in America, would meet a year later. As you walk down the main aisle of the church, I couldn't help but wonder who all had come before us, and who will we come upon? Behold, one lone tomb. And who would occupy it but a knight? Sir George Yeardley, presiding governor of the 1619 General Assembly. He was interred here at the church in 1627, a single grave in the center of the church that stood on this site. Sir Yeardley was a 3-time governor for Virginia. He died in 1627 while serving his 3rd term. He did have a will prepared shortly before his demise. This leads to suspicion that he may have been suffering from an illness or injury. Within the early bounds of the church, only one grave was found, placed in the center, a location reserved for the highest members of society or clergy. Due to the rubble found within the grave shaft, the rediscovery team believes this to be Sir George Yeardley. However, he is probably most notable as purchasing the first Africans who were forcibly brought to English America. This was an amazing sight. The original foundation of the church could be seen under this plexiglass. We were looking at a part of the original build, built in the 1600s, could still be admired today in 2022. As we were walking through the cemetery of the church, because, well, that's a thing here, you know, we were admiring the dates and the names that could be seen on the stones, or what was left of some of them. But then there was one. This one. It had an interesting carving. A skull is not uncommon, but this one captured my attention. It was very intriguing. I've done research and still have found nothing. If you think the cemetery is the only place that you will find the dead, you are sadly mistaken.
But even though the dates match for it being 2, not all of them do. But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're dropping that much that quickly.
Yeah.
What are known as the 1607 burials were found under where the 1611 structure, Councilors Row Building, once stood. The first year for the settlers being the most unforgiving. Of the original 104 that arrived, only 38 survived. One of those burials being that of this young man, killed by Virginia Indians. Forensic evidence showed erupting 3rd molars, placing his age around 15 years. Chemical signatures identify him as an Englishman. History records on May 25, 1607, a boy was slain in an attack on the fort. Information provided by Jamestown Rediscovery and Preservation, Virginia. With that amount of life lost, it is hard to imagine any area of this land where somebody is not buried. Throughout the years during excavations, it was not uncommon to find more than one person buried in a single grave. In recent history, new evidence has supported claims of cannibalism within the colonists. Skeletal remains has shown evidence of what appears to be tool and teeth marks on the bones. So tell me, what do you think of when you hear Jamestown, Virginia? John Smith? Pocahontas? Well, you would be correct on both, but this isn't about them. This is about maybe some other history that you may not know about. The exploration to Virginia to establish Jamestown was chartered by King James I in 1606. The sponsorship of the colony came from the Virginia Company of London. This was a group of investors who wanted to profit from the venture. The goal of the company was transparent enough: establishment of a permanent colony in America to make a profit. They were expecting to profit from natural resources, such as gold, iron ore, timber, and other wood products. Many colonists spent their time searching for gold and not farming. This created a significant imbalance with the food ratio. John Smith would impose a new work or starve law, requiring each colonist to farm 4 hours per day. In 1609, an accident involving gunpowder would force Smith to return to England. It was after his departure the starving time would begin from 1609 to 1610. Famine and disease would swarm Jamestown. As the years passed, the colony was slated as a failure, and the king declared the Virginia Company bankrupt in 1624. About 200,000 pounds in that time were lost among the investors. This is equivalent to $242,558 US today. One man who I feel has been severely overshadowed by other participants of this voyage, I'm about to discuss now: Bartholomew Gosnold. Gosnold, a seasoned explorer, 5 years prior to Jamestown, would travel and be the one who named Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard. He named it after his deceased daughter Martha and the wild grapes that covered most of the land. Some evidence suggests that in 1597 to 98, he also served under the Earl of Essex. He was born in Suffolk, England, in 1571. He would later graduate from Jesus College at the University of Cambridge. He studied law at Middle Temple. He would marry and have 7 children. Gosnold was popular among the colonists and opposed the location of the colony at Jamestown Island due to what he thought was unhealthy location. He also helped design the fort that held the first colony. Only 4 months after they arrived, he would pass away on August 22, 1607. Directly across from Gosnold's concrete cross, there is another sign and a shrine. This was placed here for a memorial for Reverend Robert Hunt. Hunt would be the first Anglican minister at Jamestown. He was recruited by the Archbishop of Canterbury to join the Virginia expedition. He would arrive to Jamestown with other colonists on the ship Susan Constant. On June 21, 1607, Reverend Hunt would perform the first known Holy Communion in what is now today the United States of America. This shrine demonstrates the outdoor setting of what it was like where Reverend Hunt would give his sermons to the men and boys, most who would die, as did Hunt, during the first year. Smithsonian Institute forensic anthropologists confirmed in July of 2015 that the remains they have found buried in the church belong to Hunt. Vanessa hadn't had a chance to walk through the cemetery, so Loper and I agreed to go back with her. I kept feeling a strong energy, a pull if you will. Didn't know who it was. After all, hundreds have been buried in this area. In this 15 by 15 area, during the excavation, is where graves were found clustered around the churchyard. Standing there with the camera, a name familiar to us was staring at me: Harrison. Sarah Blair Harrison, born in 1670 in Wakefield, Surry County, Virginia. She was the daughter of Colonel Benjamin Harrison II and Hannah Harrison. She would later marry Reverend James Blair. This family was part of the Virginia colonial elite. The name Harrison sounds familiar. It should be. She would become an ancestor of President Harrison, the same family discussed in Episode 2 of Your Lore, where we visited Edgewood Plantation in Charles City, Virginia, and a gristmill built by Benjamin Harrison V still stands. Harrison V was also a signer of the Declaration of Independence. This would be the connection that was made between Jamestown and Edgewood Plantation. There'll be more connections later at other locations. Sarah was known for being her own woman even in that time. It is said that during her marriage, she refused to vow to obey her husband. When asked to repeat obey, she would reply, no, obey. After the third failed attempt, the minister continued the ceremony. She married Scottish-born Anglican minister, Reverend James Blair, on June 2, 1687. The man she chose to marry, Reverend Blair, would be the founder of the College of William and Mary. As we began to walk further away from the churchyard, we were discussing amongst ourselves the starving times as it's known, how many families still in England who may have never known the outcome of their loved ones once they reached Virginia. Vanessa paused for a moment and mentioned a fire, and began pointing, not feeling the fire had anything to do directly with Jamestown, but it was on the same land. As we continue to walk slowly, something in the distance begins to appear. Founded in 1607, and for several years was indeed the center of activities in the English New World, Jamestown was dwindling. In 1699, the capital of Virginia moved from Jamestown to Williamsburg. Many followed the path to Williamsburg, and the livelihood of Jamestown steadily declined. Although this decline in Jamestown affected most, it didn't affect all the families. The Ambler family is a prime example. A man by the name of Richard Ambler moved to Virginia from England in 1716. He would settle in Yorktown. Later, in 1724, he drastically improved his status when he married Elizabeth Jacqueline. She was an heiress to a large tract of land on Jamestown Island. Together, they would have 9 children between 1731 to 1750, 6 boys and 3 girls. Sadly, only 3 of the boys lived to reach adulthood. Richard would assume a very important position as collector for the port of York River in 1724. His job entailed for him to execute and enforce the navigation acts passed by the Parliament for the regulation of colonial trade, reporting directly to Great Britain of any violations. He was also tasked with collecting taxes from tobacco exporters. The king rewarded collectors like Richard Ambler handsomely, excluding them from jury duty, military service, and paying local taxes. It is believed that the Ambler home was built around 1750. The structure consisted of 2 stories, a central hall, and 2 rooms on each side. The home would burn during the Revolution and was restored by Colonel John Ambler. The house burned again during the Civil War and was restored a second time. When the house burned for a third time in 1895, it was abandoned. During archaeological digs, a mass grave under the house was discovered. It is believed it is from the starving time. The National Park Service now administers the remains of the former Ambler estate. As you walk through the grounds, you can't help but feel the energy. No special abilities are needed. Just have to look, listen. The past will come to life. It will tell you its story. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Your Lore. As you can tell with Jamestown, there's plenty to be discovered. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.